Hi you guys, thanks for joining me. Today is going to be a really fun video. If you hear bells in the background, Peanut Butter is at it. She literally will be sitting around. She has been doing nothing all day but laying in her cat tree, laying on the bed, but yet when Mom starts to record, she has to make sound. Okay, so I have seen videos like this before and I kind of wanted to do my own spin on it. So I think I've mentioned a lot beforehand that I do watch a lot of horror movies. I enjoy horror movies. I enjoy the horror genre so far with what I've read, and I just kind of wanted to do a mix up of movies and books. So I'm going to be doing basically, if you like this horror movie, you should read this book. Some of these were easy to come up with, some of these were a little bit more difficult, and yeah, but I'm gonna go ahead and get into it. I'll tell you a little bit about the movie and I'll tell you a little bit about the book as well, but a lot of these books I believe I have mentioned beforehand, so you should know a few things about them. So this one's kind of a newer horror movie, but I have heard a lot of good things about it. I've heard a little bit of mixed reviews, but for the most part I've heard good things personally. So if you guys don't hear good things or you want to say any comments about the movie, you can go ahead and leave them down below, or anything about the books, whether yes they're good recommendations or maybe try this, and if you think there's better ones out there as well. So the first one is The Invitation. And this movie just released this year. So you have your main character Evie, who has lost her mother and she has no other family, but then she finds out that she has this like long lost cousin, and she heads to meet them, and they are in Ireland for some wedding, and she meets the host and he is like really cute. Okay, he's really cute and she's very attracted to him. But then things start getting a little creepy. There's vampires involved. She starts learning secrets and finding out that people aren't who they say they are, which, you know, it happens. But I think that if you enjoy movies like that, if you enjoy vampires in your horror movies, that you should read Go Hunt Me by Kelly Devos. It just says good girls bite back, so I mean, take that what you will. So you have this group of students who are really close friends. They've been making these horror type movies, short films if you will, for school and stuff like that. They really enjoy them and they want to go all out. So they decide to go all the way to Romania and go to the castle that inspired Dracula, and they want to shoot a movie there. When they get there, they discover that it's a pretty creepy castle, and you know, there's no question of why this castle would be used for the inspiration of Dracula. So while they're shooting this film that they're trying to make, a lot of Alex's friends start going missing, and yeah, so she is determined to stop whoever is, you know, killing off her crew, killing off her friends, and I believe it's a vampire. So very cool, very interesting. This was a buddy read that Caitlin picked in the Upside Down readathon, so I'm very excited to get to this. And yeah, it sounds really creepy and really cool, and this is a YA fantasy, so that always draws me in as well. The next movie, which you guys are going to be like, oh my gosh, if she talks about this one more time I'm going to scream, but it is the movie Frankenstein. There are many different versions of Frankenstein out there that you can watch, and even movies about like the Bride of Frankenstein, so plenty out there. The Frankenstein movie is obviously about Dr. Frankenstein. He is this scientist who is forming experiments using dead people, which is really morbid. He's basically digging graves and taking body parts, different body parts, and forming them together to create a human, but it's more like a monster. And you know, he wants to bring this monster to life, and he does, and it's Frankenstein's monster. So if you like that, I think that you should read M is for Monster by Talia Dutton. I have talked about this one before. It's basically the same kind of concept as Frankenstein, except there is this girl and her name is Frances, which I love that. But her name's Frances, and she lost her sister, and she wants to bring her sister back. But when she brings her sister back, things, you know, start happening, and she realizes that her sister isn't who she used to be, and it's kind of, I think it's going to deal with a lot of grief, a lot of trying to let go of things. So this one seems really, really good, and it's also a quick graphic novel, so it won't take you any time to get through this. So if you like The Shining, I think that you would enjoy the book Horrid by Katrina Leno, or Leno, however you say her name. So in The Shining, you have this family, Jack and Wendy and Danny. Jack is a writer, and he basically offers up his family to take care of this hotel during the winter time. Nobody else works. It's going to be just their family there. And so he takes them to the hotel. He's writing. He spends most of his time alone. And then you have Wendy, who is taking care of Danny, their son, and just taking care of the hotel in general. She does a lot of the work in that aspect. I don't know why he took the job and she did the most of the work, but that's another subject. And then Danny has what you call the shining. He sees dead people, basically. He sees a lot of different things. He's able to communicate with other people that have the shining. It goes into a lot of depth with that, so you kind of have to watch the movie to understand. But I found similarities in Horrid compared to The Shining. So you have our main character, Jane, and she has lost her dad. So her and her mom pack up where they're living, and they move back to where they used to live, which is a really old rundown house now, and it is a manor. Shocker. Jane is kind of just struggling to feel like she belongs, and she's trying to find, you know, trying to find her happiness in books, but there is this bad seed, is what they call him. I don't know if it's a girl, I don't know if it's a boy, I don't know who's who, but there's this bad seed that won't stop bullying Jane. And then you have Ruth, her mom, who is just kind of feeling all of these feelings coming back to her childhood home, and she's feeling pretty tortured. And I believe ghosts appear in this book, which if you've seen The Shining and you like The Shining, you'll know that ghosts play a huge part in that whole story. So I think you should check this one out if that's one of your favorite movies. So if you also like the movie Sleepy Hollow, and I'm specifically talking about the 1999 version that was directed by Tim Burton, you should check out Lakesedge by Lyndall Clipstone. Love this book. So the Sleepy Hollow movie is based off of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is already a book. So you've probably heard the tale of Sleepy Hollow, this little town that's creepy, and you have like a headless horseman type of guy riding through. It's very, very disturbing, but there's romance mixed in, there's fantasy, there is horror, and all of that good stuff that you get with Tim Burton movies. So I really, really enjoy it, and I kind of feel like you get the same type of vibes that you get from that movie that you get in Lakesedge. So you have this girl named Violetta, and she takes really good care of her brother, Arian, I believe is how you say his name. And Arian has this dark magic, and one day this guy she meets, who is, I don't even know what you would call him, a prince? They call him the monster of Lakesedge, but his real name is Rowan. But he has this estate, and so he finds out that Arian has these dark powers, and he has the same kind of powers. So he offers to take Arian with him to his estate and teach him how to use those powers and not be scared of them. Well, Violetta is not letting Rowan take her little brother without taking her too. So she ends up going along with him. She ends up finding out things about herself, and you know, there's this creepy manor. I feel like there's creepy manors in all of these books, but there's a creepy manor in this book, and there are, I don't want to spoil it for you. It's hard not to spoil books when they're so good sometimes. But you have a really good romance going on between Violetta and Rowan, which is always, always nice. So, but you also have this eerie essence that is around this estate, which makes it hard to be romantic. I'm not going to lie. So, I think that you would really enjoy this book because I think it has the same kind of atmosphere as Sleepy Hollow does. This next movie is a little bit, it's not really an old movie, but it was, it's older than, I guess, the movies now. but it's from 1984, and it is a horror movie mixed with fantasy, and it's The Company of Wolves. So you have this girl named Rosalind, and she has these vivid dreams, and they're about werewolves and wolves. Yeah. She dreams about these wolves and that she has to get to her grandma's house, which kind of reminds me of Little Red Riding Hood, which I think it's supposed to a little bit. But she also meets this hunter in the woods, and she feels what they call a animal-like attraction, which kind of disturbs me, not gonna lie. And during the movie, you get a lot of stories thrown back and forth by Rosalind and her grandma, and they have, you know, horror and fantasy mixed in them, so you're getting stories within stories, and it's really cool. But it's kind of a classic movie. In my opinion, it's a classic horror movie. But if you like that movie, or movies like that where you have some wolves, I think you should read What Big Teeth by Rose Szabo. I love this cover. I show you guys covers a lot, but I just really like this one. So you have Eleanor, who is your main character in this book, and she's always struggled. She doesn't fit in with her family. She doesn't fit in at her school, which she goes to a boarding school. So she ends up leaving the boarding school and going back to her home where her family is, but they're weird. They're like cutting open birds, reading fortunes, telling the future. They're weird. They're like walking around, prowling. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I'm assuming what's going on with the teeth here, but yeah, they're weird. And she realizes that she remembers why, you know, she was sent away to boarding school in the first place. And she knows that she's going to have to try and bring the family together, but also kind of calm down this darkness that she feels. And realize, you know, that she has to work on herself too. Can't just work on other people. Take care of you, boo. But from what I've heard, it's a really beautiful and beautifully written story. This is a YA fantasy, and it also is equally as terrifying to read. So I don't know about you guys, but that makes me even more excited for a book. If you like the Addams family, and again, I'm specifically talking about the 1991 Addams family, I think that you would enjoy reading A Cosmology of Monsters by Shaun Hamill. Look at the hands. Look at the hands, people. So you have this family, the Addams family, and they live in, guess what? A manor. And they're really weird. You have Gomez, the father, really strange wife as well. Morticia, which I love her name. Morticia. And you have Hand, and you have cousin It, who is covered in hair. So what you basically get with the Addams family is you get all of these weird people that are related, and you have their uncle coming in, who is not really their uncle, but he's kind of impersonating their uncle to try and get in their house, and it's a lot. I recommend watching the movie. But everybody that I've known who has read A Cosmology of Monsters has said that there are some aspects that remind them of the Addams family. I think it is a little bit darker than that, and I don't know, I haven't read it yet, but it's a recommendation that I would give based on what has been said about the book and based on knowing the movie. So you have our main character Noah, who is able to see monsters, and his family has for generations, and so his dad has built this museum in a way for everybody to see kind of how they run things and the monsters that they have seen and things like that, which is very strange. His mom also sees monsters, but she pretends that she doesn't. She's kind of in denial, and she's more focused on running their family. He also has two sisters who they kind of, in a way, also don't want to admit that they see monsters. They want to try and put it out of their mind or do things to distract them. But Noah is not really afraid of seeing monsters. He, you know, invites them in, and it just sounds really cool. It kind of reminds me of Wednesday. I feel like Wednesday Addams would be the same as Noah. She wouldn't really be afraid to let monsters in, and she would just kind of roll with it. So this might be one to pick up if that's your kind of thing. And then you have Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, which a lot of people are familiar with Psycho and familiar with the storyline. Alfred Hitchcock is a brilliant director. We will say that. It's just terrifying. So basically, this secretary steals money from her boss and runs off with her boyfriend, and they end up stopping at this motel called Bates Motel. And there she meets Norman Bates. Norman has a very interesting, different relationship with his mom, and he also has a thing for taxidermy, which I'm not here for. But I feel like if you like a psychological thriller type of film added with horror, that you definitely should check out The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. I have talked about this book multiple times. You get that chilling, eerie feeling from this book. You have no idea what is going on for a majority of the book. I feel like that's a lot with Psycho as well. You're kind of trying to piece things together in your mind. What is happening? What is going on? But you can't, you know, there's just sometimes there are things that you can't predict. And I think that's what this book, it really like does to you. I know it did that to me. You get the psychological aspect a lot. You get the thrilling aspect. I remember closing this book at one point and just kind of being scared to keep reading because I didn't know what was going to happen next. So if you want something that is more psychological with your horror, definitely check this one out. Katrina Ward is pretty good at messing with your mind while she writes her scary, scary books. Maybe you don't like scary, scary movies. Maybe you like cuter, spooky movies like Hocus Pocus, which I still have yet to see Hocus Pocus 2, but I'm making that a priority to finish or watch it very soon. So we'll give you my thoughts on that once I do. A good book if you like Hocus Pocus. I mean, there is of course the Hocus Pocus book that is in the young adult section in most Barnes & Nobles, but I think you would also enjoy The Witches. This is the graphic novel version. You can read the book by Roald Dahl. This one is by Penelope Bagieu, I believe is how you say her name, or Bagieu, and she did, you know, this graphic novel version of The Witches, and it's got really cute illustrations, and it's just kind of, the Witches movie when I was younger kind of creeped me out, scared me a little bit, and Hocus Pocus didn't really do that to me, but it's got very funny aspects and kind of, I feel like this is another book where in Hocus Pocus it's hard to believe the children about the witches, and it's hard to believe the little boys and the little girl about the witches as well. So I thought this was really interesting. I like this movie and I do like this book as well. I think they're just funny, like kiddie horror in a way, or kiddie Halloween, whatever, you know what I mean. But yeah, so you have Hocus Pocus, which follows 3 different witches and they sacrifice a virgin, and yeah, they come back and blah blah blah, and it's just a funny comic relief, but you also get that spooky fall vibes as well. And in this one, they have these women who are like really dressed up and really nice looking and everything like that, but they all come together at this convention and then like take off their mask and their clothes and all this other stuff, and they're just like ugly, like crazy looking monster witches. So it's really funny, and I think the movie Hocus Pocus and this book both give you the feel of how a kid sees danger or scary people or people they're not familiar with, so I highly recommend both of them. If you like the movie BeetleJuice, you like a little comedy with your horror, or a lot of comedy with your horror, I highly recommend My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. This is one of my favorite reads of the year and maybe one of my favorite books of all time. I said one of. So BeetleJuice is probably one of my favorite movies, even not just spooky movies, like favorite movies. You have this ghost or demon, Beetlejuice, he's like a ghost demon thing, and he kind of helps these 2 ghosts who are living in a house that is being occupied by another family with a very depressed and very struggling teenager. And the teenager sees the ghost, and she's the only one in her family that can see them, and it's just a lot of fun because yeah, if you've ever seen BeetleJuice, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's just a classic. And I feel like with My Best Friend's Exorcism, you get all the humor along with all the scary parts. There are definitely parts in BeetleJuice that make you kind of uncomfortable to watch and kind of freaked out. And I used to feel that way when I was younger a lot. And there are definitely parts in My Best Friend's Exorcism that are hard to read. You have, you know, I mean, there's an exorcism taking place. So there are going to be things that are very descriptive. And Grady Hendrix really does get in there. He gets all up in there. But he also makes it so funny. The exorcist in this book, Brother Lemon, is hilarious. I absolutely adore him. He's my favorite. And I don't know, it just, you get the 80s vibes. So you get, you know, BeetleJuice, you don't really get 80s vibes, but you get early 90s vibes and things like that. But you get, I don't know, you get early everything vibes. You just get kind of like a flashback into the 80s and the 90s instead of, you know, present day, which I really like. And yeah, so I think if you want some humor mixed in with your horror, this is the perfect read for you. I battled with myself over putting this in this video because this is not my favorite movie, but I know that a lot of people enjoy it, and it's Crimson Peak. So if you enjoy watching if you enjoy the movie Crimson Peak, I think you might like The Death of Jane Lawerence by Caitlin Starling. Again, this is a book I have not read, so don't hold me to that, but a lot of people I think would compare this to. When I was looking at my shelves trying to figure out which one would match Crimson Peak, this one is one that definitely stood out to me, and I'll kind of explain why. So in Crimson Peak, you have our main character, and she gets married off to this man who has this estate, but it's very, you know, it's a creepy manor. Here we go again with the manors, but it's a very creepy house, and his sister lives with them. So she kind of goes off with him and, you know, lives there, but they don't really make that much contact. You know, they're not really romantically involved. I think they both have attraction towards each other, but they're not really involved in each other's lives. So it's kind of weird. They're just living in the same house and things happen, and it's a creepy house. There are ghosts wandering the halls. There are sounds being made. It's crazy. That movie had a twist that I did not expect and I did not like. So yeah, you'll have to watch it and let me know your thoughts on it when you do. I can't even think straight. But I went over this book in my last video, and I believe I went over it in my last video. I've been over it in a video at some point, and I think the aspect of our main character Jane, who is living in a completely separate house from her husband, kind of reminds me of Crimson Peak, because she also goes to her husband, which she married by like a binding contract in a way. And so she goes to her husband and she's like, I need to live with you, blah blah blah, this other house is, you know, not working out, and there's just, this house is not right, this house is creepy, it's terrifying. And that just reminds me so much of Crimson Peak, and I'm excited to see the relationship between Jane and her husband and compare it to the main character's relationship in Crimson Peak as well. So there we go. This one was a bit of a struggle because there are a few aspects that you can play off of with the movie compared to the book, but I think that if you like The Conjuring, that you would enjoy Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno-Garcia. So in The Conjuring, I'm talking about the first one, but in The Conjuring you have this family who moves to this house, and the house is haunted, and it starts messing with the mom, and it also starts messing with the children in the house. And, you know, it doesn't really pay attention to the dad, but it really does attack the mom and the kids. And they end up having to call in Ed and Lorraine, who are these very famous ghost hunters. They kind of call themselves, I think, like paranormal hunters, stuff like that. And so they're there to try and exorcise this demon out of this house and try and help this family. And it's just very, very scary to think of a house being the, like, that's your home, and then this ghost is coming in, or this demon is coming in and just taking over your family and taking over things that it shouldn't and ruining, you know, your life. So this can be said about a lot of horror books, especially any that have haunted houses, because you're gonna get that aspect of something is not right here and something's messing with, you know, the family that's living in this house or the person that's living in this house. And that's where, you know, I get Mexican Gothic from, because I've talked about this one a good bit on my channel in some previous videos, but you get this spooky haunted house and our main character is going to visit her cousin, I believe is who it is. I always forget. Yeah, her cousin and her new husband, and she just knows that something is not right with this house, something is not right with her cousin or her cousin's husband. And I think a lot of things are going to come into play with maybe something is haunted this house that's causing them to act different, or maybe she doesn't really like her cousin's husband because this house has done something to him. I don't really know. I'm kind of wanting to go into this book blind, but it's the one that I thought would be closest to The Conjuring in a way that I could relate them. The next one is, if your favorite movie is Saw, you might want to check out The Mary Shelley Club by Goldie Moldavsky, I believe is how you say it. This one could fit a good bit of movies, to be quite honest, but I decided to put it with Saw, and I will explain why. So there are so many Saw movies out there. You've probably seen a couple, even when you weren't trying to watch one. So you have this game master, I think that's what he calls himself. It's been a while since I've seen a Saw movie, but you have this game master and he gets these what you think are random people, but most of the time they end up being connected in some sort of way and have like run into each other or dealt with each other at some point in their lives. And he puts them all in this game where the game is going to end with somebody's life, and they have to basically figure things out before everybody dies, or before, you know, they can try and save somebody. There's a lot to the game, but it's a deadly, deadly game, and I would never want to be put into it. So that should tell you enough. And that's kind of where the Mary Shelley Club book comes into play for me. You have our main character who is named Rachel, and Rachel doesn't fit in well with the kids at her new school. They're kind of preppy and really rich, and so she turns to horror movies as her comfort. I can relate, but not, I don't really know. Sometimes it's kind of scary if you say that horror movies are your comfort shows or your comfort movies. So she ends up getting the attention drawn to her, and there is this club known as the Mary Shelley Club who pulls pranks basically and has this fear test. I'm sorry, if you tell me that I need to participate in fear tests, be part of a club, I'm not joining. Peace out. But Rachel, she's like, okay, I guess. I don't really know. I'm assuming she's going to end up doing fear tests. Rachel, there's somebody that starts to target the group itself, and so Rachel is trying to figure out who the killer is and hopefully stop them from killing everybody in the group. Right? Somebody needs a final girl. Now you see where we're going with the next one. I'm going to relate this to a few movies, and I will tell you my reasoning. I'm going to relate this book to Scream, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street. Those have a big wide range, kind of. They're the same kind of genre, but in my opinion, there are so many Scream movies, so many Friday the 13th, so many different Nightmare on Elm Street. There's so many different, with all of those, with Ghostface and Jason and Freddy, you have those villains in different movies. Basically, there's sequels on top of sequels, and in my opinion, with all the sequels that they have and all the final girls or final people that survive, this book would be related to them, and that is The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. So I'm not going to go into what all of the movies like Scream and Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street are about, because those are pretty well known and I feel like a lot of people know about them. But the Final Girl Support Group is basically what it sounds like. There is a support group that meets up for group therapy, and they're all final girls. They have survived killers, and then all of a sudden this girl doesn't show up for a meeting, and you know, everybody's getting together and they're like, look, somebody is targeting the girls, the final girls. They're targeting the people who survived in our group. And so I think that's really cool, because they're you have to think, it's going to make you think of who it is, because they all come from different, they all survive different people. They didn't all survive one killer. They're not, you know, like, it's all different killers. So I'm wondering how that's going to play into it. The only Grady Hendrix book I have read is My Best Friend's Exorcism. So I am kind of interested in this to see where he takes it, because it's very different than the one I read. So I'm excited to see what kind of comparisons I can make to the movies when I read this book. So the next book is, if you like the movie Evil Dead, then I think you would like the Book of Living Secrets by Madeleine Roux. Can we appreciate this cover? Look how gorgeous. Love it. Evil Dead has a lot of movies. It's a film franchise that was created. It starts out with, there's like these people that are stuck out in a cabin in the woods of Tennessee, and they find the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead, and they read it, and they, you know, probably should have taken it more seriously than they did. So things do not go well for them, as you can assume. But I decided to put that one with the Book of Living Secrets, because this one is also very creepy and eerie, in my opinion, and it surrounds itself with a book. So there's the book that they're talking about takes a lot of precedent in this book itself, and the same way with the Necronomicon does in Evil Dead. I kind of put those together. You have these two best friends, and they are obsessed with this book called Moira, and they try to reach out to the author, but the author is kind of a recluse and keeps to herself, and she doesn't really reach out or try and get to know people. So instead of, you know, they kind of are okay now with the fact that they probably will not meet her, so they just reread the book over and over again and just keep wishing that they lived in the world that this author has created. Then the girls are approached by somebody who says that they can help them get into the book and live in that world, and they're really interested. They're a little hesitant, but they're more interested than they are hesitant. So they get into this world, and everything's not right. Everything that they thought they knew, the romance, the fantasy elements, are all horrific and all replaced with things you probably don't want to be replaced with. So yeah, it's gonna be scary. You probably shouldn't have done it, but I'm excited to see where this one goes. Especially, I want to know how creepy it gets for a YA fantasy book. This is the same author that has written, I'm trying to remember the series name, the Asylum series, the Asylum, Sanctum, and Catacomb, and those look creepy as crap. So we shall see how this one is. Okay, and for our last one, I chose the movie The Woman in Black, and I think if you like that movie, that you should read The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. I think both the movie and this book are psychologically very horrific, and I know that a lot of people have said this is like one of the scariest books that they have ever read, and The Woman in Black is probably close to the scariest movie I have seen. It has a lot of jump scares and a lot of dark and creepy things in it, so I think that's why it scares me a lot, but I really do still enjoy, you know, the movie overall. So this movie follows your main character, Arthur, and Arthur is a lawyer, and he's recently widowed, and, you know, he's still grieving, but he's still working and doing his job, and so he goes to this house where he's got to settle, like, an estate or settle a will, and he finds out that the house is really haunted. Like, nobody in town goes near it, and it's haunted by this woman's spirit, and they don't really know what she wants, but they know that she's lost something, and even the children that are living in the house aren't safe, and it's just very, very scary, and it had a really shocking ending that I was not expecting, and I'm still not over it to this day. In this novel, you have, it starts off in 1908, early 1900s, and this woman named Shelley was found murdered in her backyard literally months after her daughter died. And this is set in this is set in Vermont. It's very wintry, very cold, very spooky. And then you move to present day, and you have this girl named Alice who now lives in the same house that Sarah did, and She lives with her mom and her sister. Scratch that. Her name is not Alice. That's her mom's name. Her name is Ruthie. There's too many girls in this book. I'm getting them all mixed up. But anyway, Ruthie wakes up one day and Alice is gone. She has no idea where her mom is. I'm calling the police. I'm backtracking out of that town and calling the police. And she goes into her mom's room and she finds out her mom has been reading Sarah's diary, the lady who died. And she's having to backtrack, and I feel like she's going to find clues and things like that. So she's trying to find her mom, and it's probably scary, but those kind of relate in the way of the movie is about a woman who was missing, and not missing, but she's dead. Alice may or may not be dead. I'm not 100% sure, but they're looking for something that is lost. And, you know, it has kind of dual timelines because you have this woman in the house, the woman in black, and then this you have a woman who was died at the house that you're now living in. So I try to cover as much ground with like slasher films, gothic films, scary films, funny horror films. So I hope that I was able to share with you guys some movies that you might want to watch, or some books that you want to read based on if you like these movies or not. I hope that you were able to find a recommendation in here at some point. This was a really fun video to make though, and I want to just again thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you guys in the next video.